Topic 2. The Virtual Visionary. Part 1. The Ghost in the Machine. Welcome back to the English Oasis. In our last episode, we saw how Anya mastered the cultural decoder to bridge the gap between East and West. But today, we face a new kind of wall, one made of pixels, lag, and glass. In a world where leadership has moved from boardrooms to Zoom rooms, many brilliant professionals are finding themselves invisible. They have the titles, they have the English skills, but they lack the digital authority to lead. Today, we follow Hero, a technical genius who realized that in the virtual world, being a quiet leader is the fastest way to become a ghost. Hero was a brilliant software architect based in Tokyo, recently promoted to lead a global DevOps team. On paper, Hero was the perfect leader. He was technically superior, deeply empathetic, and possessed a work ethic that was second to none. He had spent years perfecting his English vocabulary, ensuring that every technical report he wrote was flawless. But in the digital realm of Zoom, Slack, and Microsoft Teams, Hero felt like a ghost. Every Monday morning, during the Global Sync meeting, the same pattern emerged. Hero would log on, his camera framed tightly on his face, his background a plain, blurred white wall. He would speak in a soft, steady monotone, carefully choosing his words to ensure technical accuracy. He would present his slides, wait for questions, and then end the call. To Hero, he was being respectful, humble, and professional, values he had cherished his entire life. But to his team in New York, London, and Sao Paulo, he was a flat, two-dimensional figure. He was a voice coming from a speaker, not a leader commanding a room. The problem reached a breaking point during a high-stakes emergency. A critical server in the European region had crashed, and the firm's largest client was losing thousands of dollars every minute. In the emergency Zoom room, chaos reigned. Voices were overlapping, stress levels were peaking, and the Western members of the team were debating 3 different solutions at the top of their lungs. Hero was there. He had the solution in his head, a complex but elegant fix that would restore the system in minutes. But every time he tried to speak, he was talked over. He waited for a polite gap in the conversation, the kind of gap that is common in a Tokyo boardroom but non-existent in a high-stress global digital crisis. He started his sentences with, "Excuse me," or "I think maybe," but his voice was swallowed by the digital noise. He felt his authority slipping away. He was the most senior person in the call, yet he was a spectator in his own crisis. If you've ever felt like your voice gets lost, hit that like button. We're about to dive into the specific digital presence techniques that turn a participant into a visionary. Later that week, a senior director pulled Hero aside for a private chat. "Hero," she said bluntly, "you have the best brain in the company, but on a screen, you're just another icon. People aren't following you because they can't feel you. In a physical office, your stature and your quiet focus command respect. But in a virtual world, presence isn't something you have. It's something you engineer. You are treating the webcam like a window, but you need to treat it like a stage. Hero realized that his polite English and his passive digital setup were failing him. He was suffering from digital dilution. Because he wasn't physically in the room, his influence was being diluted by the screen, the lag, and the distractions in his team's homes. His team wasn't being disrespectful. They simply couldn't perceive his leadership through the ghost he had become. He looked at his reflection in the dark monitor after the call ended. He saw a man who looked tired, dimly lit, and small. He knew that if he didn't learn how to command the digital space, he would remain a ghost in the machine. Hero decided it was time to stop being a participant in the meeting and start becoming the visionary of the screen. He needed to master the physics of virtual authority and learn that in the digital world, your English isn't just about what you say. It's about how loud your presence speaks. Part 2. The Digital Refactor. Hero realized that if he wanted to stop being a ghost, he had to stop treating his virtual presence as an afterthought. He began a process he called the Digital Refactor. Just as he would optimize a slow piece of code, he started to optimize the way he projected himself through the screen. In a remote world, your digital setup is your body language. The first change was environmental. Hero invested in a high-quality microphone and a lighting kit. He stopped sitting with his back to a window, which had previously turned him into a dark silhouette. Instead, he positioned 2 soft lights in front of him, ensuring his eyes were clear and visible. He raised his camera to eye level so he was no longer looking down at his team. These were small technical adjustments, but the psychological impact was immediate. For the first time, his team wasn't looking at a shadow. They were looking at a leader. But the real challenge was his voice. Hero had always spoken in a polite monotone, a style that signaled respect in Tokyo, but signaled a lack of energy in a global Zoom call. He began to work on his vocal prototyping. He realized that the microphone flattens the human voice, stripping away the nuances of emotion. To compensate, he had to over-index on his delivery. He practiced speaking with more inflection and staccato, instead of one long, flowing sentence. He began to use shorter, punchier phrases. He learned to use the power of the pause, stopping for 2 seconds after a key point to let the digital silence work in his favor, forcing the team to wait for his next move. He also had to master linguistic assertiveness. Hero discovered that his polite English was actually sabotaging him. He had a habit of using softeners like, "I was just wondering if," or "maybe we could, perhaps." In a physical room, these are seen as humble. On a screen, they sound like hesitation. Hiro replaced his softeners with direct directives. Instead of, "I think we should look," he started saying, "My recommendation is that we isolate the European node immediately. Here is why." The turning point came during a routine architecture review. Usually, Hero would wait for the noisy voices to settle before speaking. This time, he didn't wait. He used a technique called the verbal handshake. When the debate became too chaotic, he used a firm, mid-volume tone and said, "Hold on. Team, I'm stepping in here to align our focus." He didn't ask for permission to lead. He assumed it. When he spoke with a higher vocal energy and looked directly into the camera lens, the team actually stopped talking. They were conditioned to respond to the signals of authority. And for the first time, Hero was broadcasting them clearly. He was no longer just a voice from a speaker. He was a presence on the stage. He realized that virtual presence wasn't about being the loudest person in the room. It was about being the most intentional. Hero was learning that while the screen is a barrier, it is also a lens. And if you know how to focus it, your influence can reach across oceans more powerfully. Part 3. Mastering the digital pulse. Hero had fixed his own transmission. He was now brightly lit, his voice was resonant, and his directives were sharp. But a remote team can easily become a collection of passive observers. He saw the signs: eyes darting to second monitors, the subtle clicking of keyboards in the background, and the Zoom fatigue that set in after 30 minutes. Hero realized that a virtual visionary doesn't just speak. They facilitate energy. In a physical office, you can feel the room's temperature. In the digital world, that data is lost. Hero had to learn how to poll the pulse of his team across 15 time zones. He began by destroying the status update meeting, which was a waste of cognitive space. Instead, he implemented a flip the script policy. He moved all technical updates to a shared document that the team had to read before the call. The Zoom room was now reserved for only one thing: high-value interaction. He started using a technique he called the targeted check-in. Instead of asking the group, "Does anyone have questions?" which usually leads to awkward silence, he became a digital conductor. He would call on specific people with a warm-up warning. In 2 minutes, I'm going to ask Marco in Sao Paulo for his thoughts on the latency issue, but first, let's look at the deployment logs. This kept everyone on their toes. It removed the fear of being put on the spot while ensuring that no one could hide behind a turned-off camera. But the real breakthrough came when Hiro mastered the emotional echo. Remote workers often feel unheard because the feedback loop is broken. On Zoom, you get a frozen pixel. Hiro began to over-communicate his listening. When someone made a point, he would repeat the core of their idea. So, what I'm hearing from you, Sarah, is that the API bridge is the primary bottleneck. Is that correct? This wasn't just about clarity. It was about validation. He was creating a neural connection. He started using the chat function as a side channel for encouragement, dropping quick, "Great point," "Luis," or "I agree with that logic," comments while others were speaking. Hiro also addressed the most difficult part of remote leadership: the time zone tax. He stopped being time blind and began rotating the meeting times fairly across the globe. He started his meetings not with a "How is everyone?" but with a "What time is it in your world right now?" By acknowledging their physical reality, he was breaking the wall. He was no longer just a boss in Tokyo. He was a leader who inhabited their world. Hiro was transforming his team from isolated freelancers into a synchronized global engine. He had finally moved from being a ghost to being the architect of energy. Part 4. The Command Center. The ultimate test for Hiro's new leadership came at 3:00 a.m. Tokyo time. A massive synchronization error had rippled through the global database, threatening to wipe out transaction histories. It was a code red emergency. In the past, Hiro would have logged into the emergency Zoom bridge and waited for the loudest voices to stop shouting. But the new Hiro, the virtual visionary, didn't wait. He arrived with his lights on, his camera at eye level, and his voice resonant. He started with a direct directive. Team, listen up. I am taking the lead on this recovery. We are moving to a disciplined communication protocol. If you are not speaking, your mic is muted. We are going to solve this in 3 distinct phases: isolation, verification, and restoration. Marco, you have the floor for 60 seconds to report on the Sao Paulo node. Go. The room, which had been a chaotic mess of overlapping voices and panic, suddenly snapped into focus. Hiro wasn't just in the meeting. He was governing the meeting. He used his power of the pause to cut through the tension. When 2 senior engineers in London started a side argument, Hiro used his verbal handshake immediately. Stop. That debate is for the post-mortem. Right now, we focus on Phase 1. Sarah, report. Throughout the 6-hour ordeal, Hiro was the steady pulse of the team. He used his emotional echo to ensure every engineer felt seen and heard. When he saw the Sao Paulo team flagging, he directed the London team to take over tasks, showing he was aware of the time zone tax even in an emergency. By 9:00 am, the database was restored. Not a single byte of data had been lost. The CEO unmuted his mic at the very end. Hiro, I've seen a lot of crisis recoveries, but I've never seen one handled with that much clarity through a screen. You didn't just fix the code. You held the team together. Hiro realized then that he was no longer a ghost in the machine. He had successfully engineered a presence that was more powerful than any physical stature. He had proven that a leader's influence isn't limited by the borders of a monitor. He had become a virtual visionary. He turned off his camera, sat back in his chair, and looked at the dark screen. This time, the reflection wasn't small or tired. He saw a man who had mastered the physics of virtual authority. He had learned that the most important part of global English isn't the words you choose, but the energy. Hiro's story is a blueprint for the modern professional. In a world moving closer to a digital-first reality, your ability to command the screen is your most valuable currency. You cannot afford to be a ghost. The Virtual Visionary Challenge. In your next Zoom or Teams call, try one of Hiro's techniques. Adjust your camera to eye level. Use a verbal handshake to guide the conversation, Or practice the power of the pause after your most important point. Join the conversation. Are you a ghost or a visionary? What is the biggest challenge you face when trying to lead through a screen? Tell us in the comments below. If you want to stop being invisible, hit subscribe. Join our community at the English Oasis. We are dedicated to helping you master the hidden codes of global leadership. Don't forget to like this video. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we meet Elena, the conflict navigator, who will teach us how to handle high-stakes global arguments without losing our cool. Stay global, stay curious, and keep commanding your space.